You're watching the chapter number 1 of the Blender Materials, Textures and Nodes course, the Introduction to Materials. Before beginning, I would love to tell you about how we'll move forward in this course. So each chapter in this course will be divided into two sections or parts, where first of all, we'll be understanding about the concepts or the topics of that chapter, like the functioning of any nodes related to the shaders or textures, and then in the second section of the same video, we'll create a project of a retro game arcade scene. Throughout this course, we'll apply the concepts that we learn in every chapter in order to complete this entire scene by the end of this course. In this way, we'll understand not only about the different shader nodes and other concepts related to materials, but we'll also understand about their practical usage. And coming back to the first chapter, our target will be to understand about all these topics and also begin with modeling the arcade scene with some basic materials. And so let's start the chapter number 1. So I have opened this new file with the default Blender layout, and the first topic for today's chapter is to understand about the basics of materials. So whenever we open a new Blender file, we have this default cube added along with the default material, and in order to make any changes to the color or to be more specific to the material of this cube, we have to open the material properties, and it can be accessed by clicking on this icon in the properties editor. Over here you can see that we have this default material added to this cube, and in this material properties section we have a variety of settings that we can change to give our cube a different material. For example, the most fundamental property of a material, which is the base color, is set as the white color by default, and to change this color I have to click here, and then this color wheel will emerge from where we can change the color of the cube. However, the reason why we can't see any changes in the 3D viewport is that right now we are in the solid mode, and in order to see the changes, we'll be entering the rendered preview mode. So click on this icon on the top right corner, and now we are in the render preview mode. And you can also see that because of changing the base color in the material properties, the same change in color is also being applied to the default cube. Now even though we can change most of the properties of the materials by using the material properties, but the options that we have here are kind of limited, and as a result we have a better method of working on materials in Blender, which is to open the shader editor. So to create a window of the shader editor, I'll take my cursor on the top of the 3D viewport, and then this double-headed arrow will appear, and if I right click and select horizontal split, then by using this line I will be able to create a new window. So I left click here, and now we are having two windows. And now to change the above 3D viewport into the shader editor, click on this icon on the top left corner, and from this list select the shader editor. Now if I use the scroll wheel to zoom into the shader editor, then you will notice that we are having these two nodes. The first is the principal BSDF and the second is the material output, and both of them are connected together with this wire-like thing which is named as the link. It is basically used to connect two different nodes together with the help of these colored dots, which are called the sockets of that node. Also, for any node in the shader editor, if you are having the sockets on the left hand side, then they will be used to connect some other node as input, and on the right hand side for the output. You will be understanding about all these things as we further understand about the functioning of different nodes in the upcoming chapters of this course. Now, although we can use this cube for understanding about all the materials and different type of textures, but it's always better to have a proper scene with the perfect lighting and a background that we can use to understand about the different type of shaders throughout this course. So first of all, I'll delete this cube by pressing X, and we'll be adding a UV sphere in the scene. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and select the UV sphere. Then right click and apply Shade Auto Smooth. Let's also move it slightly upwards in the Z axis and place it over here. After this, we'll now be creating a background for this object. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and add a plane. To increase the size of the plane, press Tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll scale it up by pressing S. Let's also scale it up slightly in the X axis like this. After that, press 2 for the edge select mode. Select this edge. I'll move it slightly backwards in the Y axis, and let's also extrude it up in the Z axis. So press E and Z and extrude it up like this, and left click to finalize. Also, to make this middle part slightly curved, we'll be applying the bevel tool. So press Ctrl plus B, then move the cursor away, and to increase the number of segments, we'll be using the scroll wheel. After this, click the left mouse button to finalize. Now return back to the object mode, and to make this smooth, right click and apply Shade Auto Smooth. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and to adjust the view properly, we'll turn on the lock camera to view by clicking on this lock icon. After this, to adjust the camera view, we'll be using the scroll wheel or the middle mouse button. So let's adjust the camera properly according to the position of the UV sphere and the plane at the background. Also, if I press N, then the side toolbar will open from where we can change the location and the rotation of the camera. But for that, we need to select this camera object in the scene collection. So I will left click to select it, and now in the location, I'll change it in the X axis, and we'll round off to -0.5, and we'll keep the same values in the Y and the Z axis. Then in the rotation, I'll round off the X axis rotation to 90 degrees. Then in the Y axis, I'll change this to 0 degrees, and similarly in the Z axis also, let's round it off to 0 degrees. Now let's move the camera down in the Z axis like this, and let's also change the location in the X axis, and now it looks perfect. perfect. After all this, I'll select the UV sphere, press tab to enter the edit mode, and let's scale it up slightly, then return back to the object mode and we'll move it up in the Z axis. After adjusting the scaling and the location of the UV sphere, we'll disable the lock camera to view by clicking on this icon. And now let's work on the lighting part. But before that, I'll open the render properties and we'll change the render engine from EV to cycles. This will help us to get a more realistic view of the different type of materials. Now to get a proper lighting, click on this icon and turn off the scene world. After this, I'll select the background plane and we'll change the color of this plane to dark grey or dark blue. And to do this thing, I'll go to the shader editor, click on the new button to create a new material. And now you see here that we again have this default principal BSDF applied to the background plane. To change the color, I'll go to the base color, click here, and I'll reduce the brightness with the help of this brightness slider. Also, I'll change the color to slightly blue, and now the background plane looks perfect. After this, I'll zoom out, and over here, I'm having this default light placed over here. So I'll move it down in the Z axis. Let's also move it slightly in the X axis, bring it closer to the UV sphere. Now to change the color of this light, click on this icon, which is the object data properties. Now in the color, we'll change this to slight pink color, then press G to move it, and I'll place it over here. Also, let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and we'll adjust the position of the light properly in the scene. Let's also adjust the color of this light, and after that, I'll create a duplicate of this light by pressing Shift plus B, and we'll move it in the X axis and place it over here. Then for the color of this light, I'll change this from the pink color to light blue. Now press 0 on the numpad to go back to the camera view, and finally this is how our scene is looking. And yes, we'll be using this file with this particular scene of the UV sphere and the lighting along with the background in all the upcoming chapters of this course to understand about the different type of materials, textures and nodes. Now let's come back to our topic of understanding the principal BSDF node. So I'll select the UV sphere, and then in the shader editor, if I click on this icon, then you will notice that we are having a list of two materials. The first has the name material and the other one has the name material.001. This material.001 is the same material that we have used for the background plane. However, if I click on this icon again and select the first material, then this one is the material that we used on the default cube before creating this scene. So we understood about the base color, which simply helps you to change the color of any object. But then the next useful thing that we have in the principal BSDF node is the metallic value, and as the name suggests, it controls the amount of metallic strength of a particular material. By default, its value is set to 0, but if I increase this to its maximum value of 1, then you will notice that the surface of the UV sphere on which we have applied this red colored material is now looking like a metallic and a shiny surface. It is properly reflecting the light that is falling on its surface. So when the value of metallic strength is equal to 0, in that case, the material will be less metallic, and as a result, the reflections will also be less. Then as we begin to increase the metallic strength, the amount of reflections will increase since the metallic strength of the material is also increasing. Then the next one that we have is the roughness, and as the name suggests, the roughness value will control the amount of roughness of the surface on which the material is applied. For example, if I reduce this value to 0, in that case, we are having a very smooth surface, but as I begin to increase the roughness value, the amount of smoothness will reduce and we'll be having a very rough look on the material. Then the next one that we have is the IOR, which means index of refraction, and it allows you to control the bending of light when it is passing through a transparent material. You must have seen the bending of light when it enters water or glass, and this happens because of the refraction effect. Every object or material has a different value of index of refraction. For example, the value of index of refraction for air is equal to 1, for water it is 1.33, then for glass it's somewhere around 1.50, for diamond it's around 2.42. So whenever we are working on transparent materials, we can use this value to get a perfect refraction effect. Now the next one that we have is the alpha, and this one controls the amount of transparency of a particular material, meaning that if I reduce the alpha value to 0, then in that case the material will turn completely transparent, and if I begin to increase the value of alpha in the principal BSDF, the amount of transparency will reduce and the material will begin to reappear. And yes, before moving forward, almost all of these options that are available in the principal BSDF, like the subsurface, transmission, sheen, emission, all these can also be controlled with the help of their individual nodes that Blender has provided us. For example, if I press Shift plus A, then go to shader, then here you can see in this list that one of the nodes is the sheen BSDF, which is exactly the same as the sheen in the principal BSDF. Similarly, we also have the subsurface scattering, the emission, the refraction BSDF. So even if you can't understand about all these options in the principal BSDF node, then you need not worry, because we'll again cover them up in the upcoming chapters while individually studying each of them in detail. But for now, let's continue with the subsurface. Now this particular parameter controls the amount of light scattering within the material. You must have noticed that when light hits an object, for example the hand of a person, then some of the light penetrates the surface and gets scattered. The scattered light light re-emerges from the surface at various points, contributing to the overall appearance of the material, and this is known as the subsurface scattering effect, and the same effect can be obtained by using the subsurface in the principal BSDF. To see that effect, I'll go to the weight value, which is by default set to 0, and if I increase this, then the amount of effect of the subsurface scattering will increase for the material. But right now, that particular effect cannot be seen on this UV sphere because we are not having any particular option for controlling the color of the subsurface scattering. In the previous versions of Blender, there used to be an option of controlling the color directly in the subsurface option of the principal BSDF. But now, Blender has added another node in the shader, which is the subsurface scattering, and in this node, it has provided us the option to control the color. And so there is no option to control the color directly from the principal BSDF. But yes, there are a few methods which can be used to set a particular color in the subsurface option, but they are a bit complicated to understand in the first chapter of this course. So for now, I'll close this menu of the subsurface and will also delete the subsurface scattering node, which we'll be understanding in the upcoming chapters of this course. So with this selected, I'll press X to delete, and now the next one that we have here is the specular, and this one controls how shiny your material will look. To understand this parameter in more detail, I'll left click to select the principal BSDF node, and then in the side toolbar, I will click on reset node. This will reset all the changes that we have applied to the principal BSDF node so far. Now in the metallic strength, I'll keep the value to 1 and will reduce the roughness to 0.1. The reason for doing this is that to understand about the specular, we need to have a smooth and a reflecting surface. Now IOR level in the specular controls the amount of specular intensity, and the tint controls its color. For example, with the IOR level set to 0.5, if I try to change the specular tint to some specific color, for example the red color, then you will notice that we are having a slight tint of the red color on the boundaries. In fact, if I try to change the angle with the middle mouse button, then you will notice that this red colored boundary is still appearing because of the specular tint. Similarly, if I change this color to the green color, then now we are having the green color as a specular tint. Then over here, we also have two more options. The first is the anisotropic and the next is the anisotropic rotation. So you must have noticed that on aluminium vessels, like in these images, you have these circular reflections, and these can be achieved by using the anisotropic option in the principal BSDF. So first of all, I'll go to the camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad, and then in the anisotropic, I'll increase this value from 0 to 1. And when I'm increasing it, you will notice a slight reflection on this top part, and this is the result of the anisotropic parameter. Similarly, if I go to the anisotropic rotation and try to increase it, then the anisotropic effect will begin to rotate, and at a value of equal to 1, we'll again have a complete circle. So you can try to change these values in the anisotropic rotation and the anisotropic to control its effect and the rotation. And again, we'll again understand all of these settings when we individually study about them in the upcoming chapters. But for now, we'll understand about the next one, which is the transmission. But before that, I'll click on the reset node button to remove all the changes. Now the transmission helps to make the material of an object look like glass. So if I go to the transmission weight and increase this value to somewhere close to 1, then you will notice that now we are having a glass-like material applied to the sphere. So whenever you want to create a material which looks like glass, then you can use the transmission value, and to make it smoother, you can go to the roughness value and reduce this to 0. This will make the glass less rough and a lot smoother. Now the next one that we have in the principal BSDF node is the code settings. So to understand it, I'll first click on the reset node to get the default principal BSDF, then go to the code settings, and in this we are having some useful options like the weight, the tint color, and this allows you to create a coating of a particular color on your material. For example, by default, the base color in the principal BSDF is set as the white color. However, if I change this to the red color, then the material's color will also change to the red color. Now in the coating, if I change the weight to a value of 1, and in the tint, if I change this to the blue color, then in this case, even though the original color of the material on the UV sphere was red, but we have applied a coating of the blue color on the same material, and that is why it looks like this. Similarly, if I reduce the weight value to somewhere around 0.5 or 0.4, then we'll get a mix of both the colors on this material. To see it in a much better way, let's increase the weight further. So around 0.7 or 0.8, you can clearly see the red base color along with a slight coating of the blue color. Then from here, you can control the roughness value of the material generated. After this, the next property that we have in the principal BSDF is the sheen. However, this property is not something that we very often use while creating materials. So we'll not be covering this right now, but as I told you before, we also have a separate node which is called the sheen BSDF. So we'll understand about it in complete detail in the future chapters. Then over here, we have the emission, and this helps to add a glowing effect to our material. By default, the emission color is set as white, but the reason why we can't see any glowing effect is that the emission strength is set at 0. But if I begin to increase it, then you will notice this glowing effect applied on the material of the UV sphere. Similarly, if I go to the emission color and try to change it, then the color of the glow will begin to change. Now to see the glowing effect in a better way, I will hide both the lights from the scene collection by clicking on the eye buttons. After this, click on this icon and turn on the scene world. And now you will notice that we are not having any lighting in the scene except for this glowing material because of the emission values. And with this, we have learnt about almost all the important functions in the principal BSDF node. Now in the shader editor, you can also see that we are having one more node connected to the principal BSDF, and this is the material output node. The function of this node is to output the material information for a specific material which is to be applied on the object. Now let's move to the next topic for this chapter, which is to create our own material library. But before that, I'll first unhide both the lights in the scene and also click on this icon and turn off the scene world. Now a material library is basically a collection of materials which you save on a particular location of your device, and then you can use the same materials in your other Blender projects. But before creating a material library, let's first create a basic material that we'll save in our material library. So for this, I'll first select the principal BSDF node in the shader editor and click on the reset node, and now we'll be creating a material which looks similar to the brushed aluminium metal. So first of all, since we are creating the aluminium metal, so I'll go to the metallic value and increase it from 0 to 1. Let's also reduce the roughness to give it a more shiny appearance. So I'll keep the roughness value to around 0.1 or 0.2. And now to create the brushing effect, we'll be using the anisotropic option in the specular category. So over here, we have the value of anisotropic set as 0, but I'll increase it to 1 to create this brushing effect. Then in the anisotropic rotation, let's keep it to somewhere around 0.4 or 0.5 for a perfect rotation. But right now you can see that the metal that we have created is reflecting a lot of light that is falling on it. So to avoid this problem, we have to increase the roughness value. So I'll increase this to around 0.4 or 0.5, and this will give it a perfect look just like the aluminium metal. Now to save this material that we have created in our own material library, we first need to change the name of this material, which is written over here. By default, its name is material, and to change it, simply left click over here, and now we can change its name to anything that we like. So I have renamed the material to brushed aluminium, and now let's finally work on creating the material library. So go to the edit option on the top left corner and select preferences, then go to file paths, and in the asset libraries, click on the plus icon. Now we have to create a folder in order to save our material library. So right click in the Blender file view and select the new folder. Now let's rename this folder to materials, and alternatively, you can also click on this icon to create a new folder. After this, open that folder by double clicking on it and then click on the add asset library. Now in this asset libraries option, we are having this material library that we just created. So now I'll close this window, and now to view the material library, click on this icon, and from here, select the asset browser. Now click here, and in all these categories, we are having the materials, which is basically the material library that we have created. But right now, it's empty because we need to save the material that we created in this library. And to do this thing, go to the scene collection, then with the sphere selected, click on this drop down button, then click here, and now you will find this brushed aluminium material that we have applied to the UV sphere. Now to save this material in the material library, right click and select mark as asset and click on the refresh button. And with this, we are having the brushed aluminium metal added in the material library. Now it might be possible that even after clicking on the refresh button, you're not able to see the material that you created in this library. And if that happens, you need to ensure that the specific file on which we are working right now is saved in the same location as the folder that we created to save the material library. So if you're having this file at a different location, then simply open the file explorer and change the location of the specific file to the required folder. And with this, we have now completed the first section of this video. We learned about the shader editor, the principal BSDF node, the material output node, and even created our own material library. And so now let's move to the second section of the video, where we'll practically use the materials for creating a retro gaming arcade scene. So I've opened a new Blender file, and yes, as I already told you before, we'll be working with two files throughout this course. The first one was that file on which we are working till now to understand about the different type of shaders, and the second file is this one where we'll create the retro gaming arcade scene. And also, you can get the final versions of both the files with all the materials and the complete scene ready by joining the Patreon of this channel, whose link is added in the description of this video. Now we'll first begin with modeling a simple gaming arcade machine. And so with this cube selected, let's go to the edit mode by pressing tab, and we'll model the machine in such a way that this part of the cube will be the bottommost part, and we'll keep editing and extruding it in the upward direction to complete our model. So first of all, I'll press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge, let's move it slightly forward in the x-axis like this, and this will be the bottommost part of the machine. Now press 3 for the face select mode, select the top face, press E to extrude it up slightly, and left click to finalize. Then with this top face selected, again press E to extrude it, and after this, press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge on the front side, and we'll move it backward in the x-axis. Then left click, again press 3 for the face select mode, select the top face, and let's extrude it up by pressing E. So this will be the bottom part. Then over here, we'll be having the controls, and this will be the screen of the gaming machine. Now to make some adjustments, I'll press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge loop and we'll move it down in the z-axis in order to make the area for the controls slightly smaller. Similarly, press 3 for the face select mode, select this face at the top and we'll move it down slightly in the z-axis like this. Let's again extrude it up for the top part of the machine. So press E to extrude it up, left click. Now press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge on the front side and move it backwards in the x-axis. And with this, the basic 3D model of the machine without much detailing is ready in the scene. Now to work on the detailing, let's again enter the edit mode, press 3 for the face select mode and we'll be selecting these 3 faces on the sides, then select these 2 faces on the front part, and similarly I'll also select these 3 faces on the other side. Now press I to insert and again click I to individually insert the faces, then left click, and to extrude them along their normals press Alt plus E and in the extrude menu select extrude faces along normals. Now I'll take my cursor away from the faces and left click to finalize. With this, we have now applied the insert faces effect and also extruded these faces inwards in order to add some detailing. Now return back to the object mode, and to get a better view of the 3D model, click here and turn on the cavity. By doing this, we'll be able to see the empty spaces in the geometry in a much better way. Now let's also increase the size of this machine in the y-axis. So press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and to scale it up press S, Y and increase the scaling in the y-axis. Then left click, and after adjusting the scaling, we'll return back to the object mode. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create some gaming controls for the machine, and for this I'll first bring the 3D cursor at this point. So with the shift key holded, I'll click the right mouse button at that position where I want to place the 3D cursor. Now press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder. The cylinder will get added at the position of the 3D cursor. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, press S to scale it up in the Z axis and left click to finalize. Now we'll rotate it in the Y axis like this, and let's scale it down according to the size of the game controls. After this, let's go to the front or the side view to adjust the position of the game control. Now let's change the angle, and we'll now place a UV sphere on this front part. So with the shift key holded, I'll click the right mouse button at this position in order to bring the 3D cursor over here. Now press shift plus A while being in the edit mode and select the UV sphere. Press S to scale it down and left click. Let's change the angle. Now go to the front or the side view and adjust the position of the UV sphere. After this, return back to the object mode, right click and apply shade auto smooth. Let's create a duplicate by pressing shift plus B and move it in the Y axis over here. Now the next thing that we'll do is to work on creating the materials for this arcade gaming machine. So let's go to the rendered preview mode and also change the render engine in the render properties from EV to cycles. To get a proper lighting, click on this icon and turn off the scene world. Let's also disable the scene lights, and now we'll select the body of the machine. With this selected, we'll now apply some materials to it. But instead of using the shader editor, we'll apply the materials by going to the material properties. So I'll click on this icon, and by default, we have this white material added, and in the surface option, you can see that the default principal BSDF node is selected here. And as a result, all the properties that were available in that node can also be controlled from this menu. For example, in the base color, I'll change this to the purple color. Let's also bring down the brightness slider to make the color darker. Then to increase the metallic strength, I'll go to the metallic value and increase this from 0 to somewhere around 0.5 or 0.6. Let's also bring down the roughness value. So we'll keep it to 0.3 or 0.4. And with this, we are having a simple metallic material applied to the body of our machine. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create some new materials for some specific parts of the machine. And to do this thing, let's first go back to the solid mode, press tab to enter the edit mode, and now we have to select all the faces where we wish to apply some new material. So first of all, I will select this face loop by holding Alt and left clicking here, and then to select multiple face loops, I will keep holding the Alt button, but along with that, I'll also hold the Shift button. Now left click here to select this face loop. Let's select this one also, change the angle, then with the Alt and the Shift key holded, select this face loop, this one also, and just like this, let's also select these 3 face loops on the opposite side. And yes, if you want, you can select or deselect any face loop depending upon the geometry of your model. Now with all these faces selected, we have to create a new material that we'll apply to the selected faces. So go to the material properties, and to add a new material slot, click on the plus icon, and to create the new material in this slot, click on the new button. Now the default principal BSDF is applied, and if I go to the rendered preview mode, then you will notice that this new material is not yet applied to the selected faces. So to apply it, click on this assign button with all the selected faces. And now in this material, I'll first change the base color to yellow. Let's also increase the metallic value to around 0.4 or 0.5, and let's also bring down the roughness value to give it a smoother appearance. Then scroll down, and in the emission, we'll use the emission color and the emission strength to create a glowing effect. So in the color, let's choose the yellow color, and in the emission strength, let's enter a value equal to 1. After this, return back to the object mode, and then if you want, you can adjust the metallic strength or the roughness value to give this yellow material a better appearance. Also, you can go to the emission strength value and increase or reduce the strength of the emission. But for now, I'll keep the value to somewhere around 0.8 or 1, and then moving ahead, the next thing that we'll do is to apply the bevel modifier to this object to give it a realistic appearance. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Now in the number of segments, we'll increase this to 3 or 4, and in the amount, I will keep this to the default value of 0.1. Now moving ahead, let's now work on creating a black colored screen for the front part of the machine. So press tab to enter the edit mode, select this face, go to the material properties, and to create a new material, click on the plus icon and click on the new button. Now in the base color, I'll reduce the brightness to change the color to black, and let's also reduce the roughness value to give it a smooth and shiny appearance. Now click on the assign button and return back to the object mode. Now to control the amount of reflection on this black screen, you can go to the metallic value and increase this. So I'll keep it to somewhere around 0.2 or 0.3 in order to have some slight reflections on the screen. Then I'll select this control, create a new material in the material properties, and I'll set the base color to red. After this, if I zoom in, then you can see that the material applied on the surface is very rough, and to give it a smoother appearance, I'll go to the roughness value and we'll bring it down from 0.5 to 0.1, and by doing this, we are now having a smooth and shiny surface. Now press tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also go to the solid mode by clicking here. Now in the edit mode, I'm having this UV sphere selected, but if in your case the UV sphere is deselected, then simply keep the cursor over the UV sphere and press L, and this will select all the vertices linked to the UV sphere. Now go to the material properties, click on the plus icon and create a new material. After this, in the base color, I'll change this to the yellow, and let's also bring down the roughness value to 0.1. Now return back to the render preview mode. Let's also click on the assign button and return back to the object mode. If you want, you can change the base color to any color of your choice for the game control. For example, here I have selected a combination of red and the pink color for this particular game control. Similarly, I'll select this one, and now suppose I want to apply the pink material that we created for this object to the other game control. And to do this thing with this game control selected, I have to go to the material properties, click on this icon, and this will display a list of all the materials that we have made in this file. Now select the required material, which in this case is the material.004, which is pink in color, and by doing this, we are having the pink material applied to this game control. Similarly, for the spherical part, I will apply this red material. So click on the plus icon, then click here and select the material.003, which is the red material, and to apply it, press tab to enter the edit mode, and with the UV sphere selected, click on the assign button, and with this, we have now applied some very basic materials to the different parts of this arcade gaming machine. Right now, it is looking very simple because the only node that we have learned in the chapter number 1 is the principal BSDF node. But as I told you before, we'll be learning a lot of new shader nodes with every new chapter, and we'll be making the changes to the materials on different parts of the arcade gaming machine and also to create the rest of the scene. But for now, let's finalize the scene for the first chapter by adding a plane below this arcade gaming machine. So for this, let's first select all the parts of the machine including the game controls, go to the solid mode, press 1 on the numpad, and we'll move it up in the Z axis like this. After this, press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane, and right now it is being added at this position because of the 3D cursor. So I will delete it, and to reset the position of the 3D cursor, press shift plus C. Now press shift plus A, then go to mesh and again add the plane, press tab to enter the edit mode, and let's scale it up 5 to 10 times. Now return back to the object mode, and let's now apply a very basic material to this plane object. So go to the material properties, click on the new button, and in the base color, I'll reduce the brightness, and let's also change the color to the green color. You can also increase the roughness value in order to make the surface of the base have a less smooth and reflecting look. And with this, we now arrive to the end of this chapter. Today we learned about the principal BSDF node, the shader editor, creating the material library, and then in the second section of the video, we used our knowledge of the principal BSDF node to create some very simple and basic materials for this gaming machine. And so our next chapter will be the chapter number 2, fundamentals of shaders. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.